So I'd just like to say thank you for an interesting series of presentations, and I have some comments for Professor Allen, please. I am not an economist, I'm an epidemiologist, and so I'm not going to talk about the Miguel and Kramer trial, but I do need to raise a couple of points about the Cochrane review, because it's seen very much as a supporting document to the Miguel and Kramer trial. It's quite important to know that on epidemiological grounds, that review is also has been subject to quite a lot of epidemiological critique, and it's not necessarily to be concluded that the Cochrane conclusion of no evidence for deworming is necessarily the correct epidemiological conclusion, because what we've got here is randomised controlled trials being included in a systematic review. The vast evidence for STH morbidity cannot be investigated in a randomised design. So even that in itself is missing a large amount of the evidence that is available as associational evidence. The particular Cochrane systematic review of deworming, as you have mentioned, considered unscreened children in the majority of trials, and in a randomised design that is not bad, but in pooling that in a systematic review, that is a very difficult thing, and it is probably going to be quite debated whether that is appropriate, because what has been able to happen is by pooling trials of unscreened children where therefore you do not know the underlying STH prevalence, you actually don't have a baseline position to be forming. And so the Cochrane systematic review has analysed STH as a group. They are considered a group in how we talk about them, but they are independent species, they have different genuses, they have different impacts on morbidity, even in what we do know. They have different impacts in terms of the drug efficacies against each of these helminths individually, and by pooling all STH and all deworming treatments in a systematic design, you have actually wiped out any ability to detect effects on morbidity, and so it can be quite strongly debated whether or not that systematic technique is appropriate. And so I think for me personally as an epidemiologist, I would be very saddened if people left this room taking a one systematic review which has been done many times over the years, which has, as you know, been contested each time it's reissued. It would be very sad for me if we see one of the most significant public health interventions in the world be slightly destabilised on the basis of an evidence debate which is going to go on in economic and epidemiological circles for a very long time to come. And so that's just my comments back, please.
Do you have anything to say to that?
You kept saying you, and
apologies.
I have to say I've been rather sympathetic to some of the critiques of the process. I have to say I'm rather sympathetic to some of the critiques of random control trials generally, because they're very good at some things and not very good at other things. So I think your points are, to some extent, well taken. So, you know, the arguments do go both ways, because lots of arguments have been made by those promoting mass drug administration that certain kinds of studies that replicate random control trials are the most effective way of assessing them, not least the Miguel and Kramer trial. I mean, one of the most bizarre things about this debate is that Miguel and Kramer and others who are endeavouring to find some residual value in their research have been arguing along the lines that you have. But in the past, the strength of Miguel and Kramer's findings have been because they've been associated with random control trial. So in other words, they've even described their study as a random control trial, but actually it isn't. It's a step-wage design. They've been inspired by random control trials to do a social experiment. But the credibility of the trial, of their study, was linked to random control trial. And now we have this review of random control trials suggesting that they don't have an effect. But I take your point. I mean, there's also the issue that what is deworming? Once you start mixing different, I mean, it's not just soil-transmitted, different kinds of soil-transmitted helminths. It's also linking soil-transmitted helminths with schistoma landslide put together. I mean, because I'm more interested in the rhetorics that are generated by these views and how those debates and arguments, from my point of view, appear to propel us away from evidence. It's almost like no one really wants to know what effect the programs actually have on the people who are receiving it.
So I think in that context, we're both very much on the same page that what we are all questing for is greater evidence.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, I've done my very best to look at what the current infection rates are at each site in which we have worked. How many years are we into this program? It's very difficult to get that information. I've tried to find out what are the school enrollment rates and completion rates at each site in which we've worked. Very difficult to get robust data of that sort. And perhaps even worse, there's a sense that it's not even seems a priority to collect that information. And to me, that seems a kind of deeply problematic relationship with mainly impoverished, politically marginal people who are likely to be the people who've got a neglected disease.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just add on to that? Because I was sitting with much interest and surprise at the experiences you've had. Because I'm involved in the National Control Program in Zimbabwe that is treating all primary school children, 5 million of them. It's now going to have the 4th round of mass drug administration this June. And our experience is very different. First of all, it is run from the grassroots. As I keep mentioning, Zimbabwe is one of the highest increase rates in African adults, 97%. These are educated people. The mothers know about the importance of health. They want their children to be treated. One of the reasons there's such a successful campaign in Zimbabwe is the parents came to us and said, what are we going to do about this? And us as scientists came up with the evidence base to get the Ministry of Health to be involved. So every year, people come, they are treated. We have mass media focus just before the MDA. It involves national television, national newspapers. People know exactly what their children are being treated for. They know exactly what they're going to be treated with. They know exactly what side effects to look for. They are monitored. We are also part of an independent monitoring and evaluation plan. We've got 20 sentinel sites throughout the country. We are taking blood, urine, stools, everything. We're evaluating the effects on infection, on immune responses, allergy, autoimmune, all that. It is well within part of the program, and it is running very well. And I keep my fingers crossed that our June campaign will also be successful.
Could I thank you very much, panelists, and thank you, Tim. I really enjoyed the way you put across your arguments. I come back to the wider issue of MDA. It's not just for STH, it's for schisto, it's for filariasis and onco. And if you look at the onco data, in terms of coverage and sustainability of programs over a 15-year plus period, you see that the communities actually want the products that are available. The same applies to the LF program, and the epidemiological data from many sites of the LF program is pretty impressive about the impact it's had on the transmission based on antibody and antigen measures. The point about the onco program I want to make is that of the treatments in the onco program, 100 million a year, 50 million of those treatments reach communities that are more than 20 kilometres from any health centre. Now, I can't think of a programme which gives that level of access to poor people who actually go and get the tablets themselves from the health facility. So I can't really say that these are not beneficial programmes. I absolutely take some of the points you've made, and I think very often these are site-specific issues. The point I would make about the deworming debate, and I'm absolutely not in a position to make a judgment about the economics, but why do vets deworm animals if they don't have a benefit? And I think also we should reflect, and particularly my colleague from Liverpool articulated the differences between different species of soil-transmitted helminths. The data from the work that was done on trichuris in Trinidad, Lanny Stevenson's work and so on, has been discounted in this. And I'm concerned that a public health measure, which, when ideally distributed, should have benefit, is being eroded, I think that's probably the right term, by really arguments which I don't think are going to take a long time to resolve. I am concerned. And I come back to, why do veterinarians deworm animals? If it wasn't a benefit, why have they been doing it? And are they subjected to randomized control trials of this depth?
I take your point. Why do vets deworm animals? They deworm animals because it's effective, for going up in the you can deworm them with the same tablets. Worth noting, though, that in New Zealand they can't continue to use albendazole anymore because it has triggered drug resistance. So there's an issue there that we need to be concerned about. But that's why, if you like, in the second part of my talk and in the second half of this paper, I asked precisely that sort of question. There's all this debate about these data sets from the late 1990s that become very heated. But are these people who are supposed to be receiving these tablets actually receiving? And the evidence that we have found, particularly with schisto and with soil-transmitted helminth treatments with albendazole, is that treatments in schools are more effective in terms of reaching the target than in the community, but nevertheless do fall way short of the targets that have been set racially. Just one point with the lymphatic filariasis work, that the work that we did on NF, the take-up of NF drugs, we weren't actually working at that time, that particular time, on NF. We were working on soil-transmitted helminths and schisto. But the take-up of those drugs dropped dramatically because it was taken out of the school system. Because they were put into with the lymphatic filariasis treatment in the areas that we were working in Tanzania, the treatments were in the community. And so albendazole was given together with ivermectin to adults and children in the community. And so while treatment in school with praziquantel was actually as high as 70% in those areas, treatment in the community as a whole was much lower, much lower. I take your point about onco. Onco, perhaps, in terms of particularly treating younger people, there is, it doesn't always work so well. We have tracked onco treatment in highland areas of Tanzania. We've had quite low rates of take-up in some places. But nevertheless, there is an awareness of how the disease is caused and an awareness of how treatment has an effect. With LF, that's slightly less clear, or rather less clear, because people who've got hydrocells and so on don't have any perceived effect if they take tablets. What we have found is that where there are surgery attempts together with treatment programs, then take-up rates shoot up. So in the villages in Tanzania where we helped locate places where there should be surgery for people with hydrocells, in those villages take-up rates shot up at the same time. So in other words, it's a combination of strategies. I think kind of awareness of the disease in relation to taking the tablets is really very important. I mean, the survey that we did in coastal Tanzania, where we asked people repeatedly about various diseases to try to kind of tease out what they knew about various diseases that were being treated. They used local terms for lymphatic filariasis and Busha. We found that more than 80% of the people we interviewed had no notion that mosquitoes were connected with infection after multiple rounds of treatment. So there was a kind of a disconnection between the treatment and knowledge of the disease. And lots of local stories.
all the importance or the benefits of individual treatments in terms of morbidity, especially for schistosomiasis. I've been making this case for a long time. It'd be nice for somebody else to say.
Well, no, very much so. I think, to me, the benefit is incredibly clear. I think the message gets diluted in academic research because it's not asking the right questions with the evidence that's collected. So I would fully enforce that. But again, I endorse what Tim says about socio-economic and cultural contexts. But I do want to ask one question to our NTV Sugar. When is it going to come out in French for Francophone countries?
It's actually already translated into French. It's available on the Coinfections platform, and so I can double check you and come back to you, but I know that they have been translating series 3 and 4, so I just don't know if they've been broadcast yet. And
my plea to you is at the end of this, please include female genital schistosomiasis in one of those programs.
I will do that. Great, thank you. With the sound effects from the drilling, I think that's a hint that we should probably go for lunch. Please let's continue the conversation. It's been very edifying for all of us here this morning. Thank you.